Hello, everyone. Hello, everybody, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 390. Yes, I'm not wearing a traditional polo. I'm wearing a new spiffy swag we got for the hospitality channel. Just did a promo piece with them and still wearing the t-shirt. So that and the big old fluff beard. It's getting cool down here in Florida in the United States. It got down to, what is it, 60 degrees. Burr, time to get out the parkers. Anyways, thank you and welcome to today's show. As always, happy to have everyone that's joining us live around the world. We always, of course, simulcast this on the TV channel and also on our social media platforms. Wednesdays, 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian time, and Wednesdays, 11:30 a.m. London, UK time. So we get our you friends. Although that being said, thank you everybody that's watching us from around the world. Sincerely appreciate that again, as always. Today's topic, let me slide on over to my happy notes. I actually had a quandary because I had several topics that came through this week that I thought were relevant, and I decided, well, rather than try to shoehorn them all into one show, and we're trying to keep them into one topic, I thought we'd just address one of them and toss the other ones into the podcast conversation as a lead into next week's live show. But today's topic that I'd like to hit is an ongoing discussion I'm having with people as we're rolling into 2023, and that is reports. Now, you've heard me say on the live show, for those that have followed us so nicely, the thousands of people, I mean, really, honestly, sincerely, thank you, that watch us, that I've always referred to reports being the least valuable compared to the analytics associated with them. The reports are fine, but they often don't create action items. They're a representation of data. And that data is usually just quantified by the fact that, yes, we did it. Yes, we're tracking it. Yes, we have it. And not a lot comes from it past that point. And a lot of times reports are given to people that, frankly, don't have any action towards them. Their value of reports is more about notifications. Are they aware of things? Which is, in their world, what the report is for. Often, when viewed with that filter, that optic, using buzzwords, it turns into less about the variety of the data and more about the importance of the markers that the data is showing, that the report is providing. And unfortunately, a lot of our reporting processes have come from our old traditional ways of data. The more you shove into it, the more relevant the report, the more dramatic the report, the more mea culpa the report, as it were. Like, well, hey, that was in the report I gave you, so you can't be mad about that. The report showed you that that was XYZ issue. Yes, if you knew to or was even looking for that data. That's where reports fail. And that's why I always have said analytics are much more valuable because they create the action items that reports are meant to provide. A report does provide it if that's what you're looking for. Analytics is the methodology of reviewing the data to come to some sort of awareness for an action to be created or a validation of an action that has been done. Granular, crucible, down to the core of it. That's the real value of all this. Now, having discussions with all the different tiers of people that are involved in all the processes of things, I don't try to stereotype anyone, but there's gatherings of people that tend to be in trend, that are this similar in the sense of how they view or look or desire reports and data and so forth. And we'll break them down a little bit here. Sorry, coffee. It's always a cold thing again. Oh, by the way, if you want one of these, on the Hospitality Club, we already have them available for everybody in the club. They can go over and pick one of the hospitality channels. I'm really not a big swag seller, so I don't really have a channel made up for it yet, but I will put it into the podcast show notes, which is our audio one we will do after the live show today. A link in the show notes, and I'll put a link in the show notes here too. If you want some cool swag, Hospitality Channel, Hospitality Club, yeah, those are the two shirts we have, and stickers and just fun stuff. We'd give it to people that are participating with us on the channel and so forth. But if you'd like to pick some up, it's kind of cool stuff. I always loved our little logo. Anywho, back to the reporting analytics conversation. So classifications of people that work with or require reports and or analytics and so forth. You have the aggressive, need to know everything people. They want as many variations to the reports as possible, every piece of data, so that they are the proverbial uh, benchmarking person. They're the what is it? The authenticator. Um, I'm missing the word. They're the resource. They're the person that is most aware of everything. Boy, that word is missing me. Age creeps in on you, doesn't it? Anyways, there's a word for it, and it's about being knowledgeable about everything. Uh, anyways, they want to be that. They want to be aware of all these things. Doesn't mean they understand it. Doesn't mean they know what they're looking at by having it. They don't know necessarily what to do with it when they do see it. And I'm not classifying everybody as being in that, but most of them, it's just about having the data, having the report. Then you have the flip of that coin, which is people that have the data and actually look at it and say, wow, we really need to act on this, or wow, this is very insightful for this, or whatever. And those people usually answer to somebody because they're not usually the ones in charge. And I don't say that in deference to the people in charge not having the capacity of doing that. Their spectrum of what they have to worry about and deal with and make decisions on is exponentially larger. They can't just be myopic on this type of content and data and really drill down and have the time to drill down on it to create these observations and insights from the data and the reporting. So usually people that are very much about that answer to people like that because they have those same people in other things that they have to have as much data related to, that have to have that many decisions to, that they are the orchestrator of decisions based on the feedback of the professionals that they have with them. Good leadership usually has that relationship. They have very talented people that are very in tune with what they're responsible and engaged with: data, analytics, reporting, causation, action items, so forth, and answer to it in the dialogue that they can make a very intelligent decision on what they're responsible for. So you have those groups kind of lumped together in a pile of data. Like there's a lot of data that goes to those guys, girls, peoples, them, they're theirs. And then you have the report to have a report. They want it streamlined and they want it to be interpretive for them. They want the green is good, red is bad, arrow up, good, arrow bad, down. They need visualization to understand what the data is. Is this a good thing you're telling me, or is this a bad thing you're telling me? Is this something I should be aware of, or is this something I should be able to ignore? Will I be in a problem with this, or is this a happy number I get to share? It's not because they're simplistic like that. I don't want to be derogatory. I'm not trying to be derogatory by saying that people look at data with the green good, red bad. I make analogies about that all the time and smirk at it. But the reality of it is that they have so many varying responsibilities sometimes, or such a variety of things they have to be the juxtaposition for. Maybe that was the word I was looking for earlier. That they don't have time to see beyond that. They just need to know, is this something that is in my front view window, or my back window mirror, in the sense of something I don't need to worry about, something that's already happened and I have no causation for that. Those people just need a simplistic perspective of the reporting data. Then you have what I say is a category above and beyond all that. And that is, I've always said that when I worked for somebody, they always give me this funny looks to someone that just met me for the first time when I used to work for people in large companies. Stop doing that. As I say, look, everything I know about something, I will share with you. I'll overshare. Because for you to do the job you're responsible for, and for the decisions that you have to make that I have to defer to you for, it's best that you have the full spectrum of knowledge to make those decisions. So my commitment, my promise to anybody that I had to work for was, I will let you know everything I know about this, good, bad, indifferent, up, down, whatever, so that you now have the knowledge that your job requires for you to make a decision. Not everyone that I worked with warranted that, but that was my constant promise to anybody that I had to work for. And to a strange degree, I mean, that's translated over to my clients. Everything good, bad, whatever. You're being shared with the data. This is everything that I'm aware of. And then I allow for them to figure out, do they want my influence in the decision making? Do they want my influences on and understanding it? Because with every outside resource that you ask, whether you intend it or not, there is a bias. That bias, whether intended or not, is related to the person's perception of the data of what they would do given the responsibility of what should be done. Now you're adding components of variables to the data that aren't in the data. Is this somebody's department versus somebody else's department? Is this exposing something that this person isn't directly responsible for that may have repercussions for somebody else and or themselves as a retribution or a ripple effect? And now those biases begin to come into the interpretation of the data. And so a lot of times, to avoid the need to expand the decision tree, as it were, of people around you to give their opinions of things, sometimes the person in the decision position, the one that is the pinnacle of all this discussion, needs to have some direct interpretive value based purely on the data. What do I mean by this? It sounds like I'm talking in circles, maybe. Reports are reports, and reports can be made like statistics. I can report sunshine and rainbows on a cloudy day. Doesn't mean it's a accurate report. It means that the data I used made it accurate, but it doesn't mean that it's actually accurate to the situation at hand. Statistics are like that. I don't like that number. It doesn't make me look good, but this number does. If I really find this abstract comparison to this comparison, boom, 4 out of 5 dentists say, well, if I only ask 5 dentists, that makes my statement, but it doesn't make it inaccurate that all the dentists in the world have that same opinion. Same true goes for reports. Is I can make a report look whatever I want to, and sadly, a lot of agencies do exactly that. They provide the metrics that support why you write them a check. It doesn't mean it's the metrics that you need. It doesn't mean the metrics that you are about action items. It doesn't mean the metrics that are showing good performance or bad performance. They're just showing validation of the vendor's relationship with you. They can be based on vanity metrics. They can be based on applied metrics, values. Oftentimes, when we do audits for clients, to just give them an honest, unbiased, we're not here to displace your vendor. We're here to give you an audit. We offer audits, by the way, just in case you know why I'm talking about these. We offer audits about your performances, your technologies, your marketing strategies, your revenue strategies, all this kind of stuff, and also your competitors, and also your entire market, so forth and so on. Here's the data, not because we want to amplify what we do well and what your vendors aren't, which was what so many other audits get offered for, but rather here's an unbiased perspective of your world. Here's all the metrics related to all the markers that qualify this stuff. You decide what you want to do with that data. And sadly, in that process, we discover that a lot of vendors create artificial metrics to amplify their value proposition to their clients. Now that's in a report, and the report looks good and it makes everyone look good. The person that hired them makes them feel good that they hired the right people, so forth and so on. But at the meanwhile, the KPI that everyone's measuring, revenue metrics or what have you, isn't performing. But they're not looking where they need to look because this report over here of these vendors say that they're doing fine. That's because the report's making it look like they're doing fine because they pick the numbers to make them look fine. That's why reports have flaws. So going back to my Apex person, that before they begin to ask for opinions of their team and get what the variations of perception that come along with it, they should have some pure data metrics. Now, going back to they're responsible for a boat ton of stuff in multiple departments and have multiple decisions, and they have multiple piles of data in each of those departments. For efficiencies, they don't have the latitude of getting granular with it unless it's such a crisis issue that they have to be myopic on it and ignore everything else and look just at this. I've been using myopic today. That's the third time, and I get to keep the word. So what they need is notifications. Dun, 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 dun. I've had this discussion with friends of mine, compatriots in the industry and so forth, and it gets lost into, again, what is provided by their services versus what the market provides, whether there's validation to it, so forth and so on. I'm talking about the purity of notifications. One of the tools we talked about in the podcast, I think this goes back a couple of years, was a platform called Jepto. And what that did was you went into it and you connected your paid ad accounts or your paid social accounts or your organic accounts. And you said, hey, I want to measure this, whatever the number of this is, whether it's people that liked something in social, whether it was people that viewed a video ad, or whether it was people that clicked on an ad, whatever the metric is. Budget spend was another metric. Whatever it was, you would create a metric and you said, I would expect it to be this and notify me, okay, according to pace, if it goes above or below and what it does. And what the platform did was it would identify that it would send a notification out that says, okay, hey, you're at pace for this metric you asked us to measure. And should it continue at this pace, you'll be at X percentage above or below your budget for this year for spend, or whatever it is you're measuring, or this month for spend. It would allow for that to be measured. And so now that reporting was sent over to people that just needed to know, is the ship following the star? Are we getting where we want to go? Is there some variation that should be of concern or happiness? This means that you're creating milestones, benchmarks. Okay, so two different things. Milestone is a measurement to, benchmarks are a progress of. Okay. And I don't mean to confuse those two. Your milestones are where you get to a point that you wanted to get to by the point you said you wanted to get to it. Benchmarks are the acquisition of that goal as you progress towards it. So these benchmarks, okay, are a measuring stick. If anybody that's driven in snow, and a strange, somebody in Florida would talk about driving in snow, is, I always wonder when I up north and I saw when it wasn't snowing, because I can't drive in snow, why these huge sticks were on the side of the roads with little red flags on them and so forth on the side of the roads that were so high up. It's like, what's that for? They're under construction. A friend of mine that lived up there says, no, that's for when it snows, we know where the edge of the road is. Oh, and it made sense. Never had that experience until I actually rode with somebody that was driving, fortunately, in the snow, that I realized, hey, look at those little red flags that are really down below us. It's like, yeah, that's those tall sticks we showed you about before. I'm like, aha. That's what benchmarks are. Those benchmarks are measured by notifications. Are you within the parameters that you want or expect for what you're asking to measure? Those there themselves alleviate a tremendous amount of burden on reports. I've unfortunately witnessed that so many reports are made within organizations that very few people read at all, and even fewer people actually spend time with. What has happened is that they're usually onions. Now, shake your head if you can't never heard this before. A report may have started because somebody was interested in a particular metric, and it was a valid metric, and it wanted to be shared. And then that person that was being shared to said, this is a great metric. We should share that with everyone that's like me in the organization, so everyone's aware of the same metric. So then the report gets distributed to multiple people for the same reason, the same metric. And then somebody else gets that metric and says, wow, this is great, but wouldn't it be great if this metric was on top of that as well? Okay, great. So now everybody gets that metric added to the metric they were already getting from the one person that started it. So everybody's getting the same amount of data. Then that continues to begin to pile on, layers of an onion. And the next thing you know, you have a very large report that now no one really has time to dive into, but has to acknowledge that they've seen it. How many reports have to be checked off of? Well, it was sent they received it. Did they open it? Yes, they did. Great, check mark. That's how sometimes this resorts down to. And then that report is packed onto another report for the same validation, the same creation by somebody else. And now next thing you know, a property manager is very upset for the fact that they spend more time either creating the data to create the report that they have to share their content piece in that aggregates it, that gets sent to everyone else, or more time having to read more reports that don't give them value to their daily routine of what they have to be responsible for, which is the operation of the hotel or resort. And so because of that reason, the reports are scorned. The reports are ignored, or they're at the minimal list of engagements, so that they don't get into trouble for not having looked at the report. But the value of the report has long since disappeared for them. It's not that the report's data is any less valuable. It's just the stockpiling of all that data on that report, and that report with that report and other reports and more reports. And then it turns into the bane of what every property despises. And that is, they spend more time in reports and meetings than they do actually doing their job. And, that goes for management companies, implying that to the properties. That goes to ownerships, to managements, to properties. That goes to brand, to ownerships, to management, to properties. And then in the property itself, you have the cumulative operation of the property, and then you have the departmental properties. I remember as food and beverage director for many hotels that my reporting process that had to go to the general manager. Actually, it was to the accountant. He was more centralized for the reporting process. Sales had to do the same thing. Front desk had to do the same thing. Back in reservations. Okay, we did have revenue manager in early days, and then turned into revenue manager. All the departments had to have their weekly reports. And we have our exec meeting. And all of our departments had a report on our performances to our budget, to events and so forth, and how it collaborated with others departmentally. And then that had to be aggregated all together. The GM had to have his report, and that report had to go up to the management company. The management company put it to the ownership, and brand, of course, had their down trickle to it. We had brand reports that we had to do. There was management team reports that we had to do. Ownership had certain performance reports that the GM had to do. Ton of reporting, ton of data collection, ton of time. And that doesn't even include all the meetings associated with it. And so it turned into a performance of just getting the report off the desk than it was the value of the report itself. So again, going back to my topic of today of reports versus notifications, there are a strata of people that they need to be unfettered with the responsibility of the report and more about the notifications that solicit action items. That's the real value, I think, of transversing how things are being currently done to how things can be better done. I'm not poo-pooing and throwing all reports in a pile saying, yay, let's burn them all like disco records. Instead, I'm saying, you have to be old for that one. You have to look at and say, what is the real value of this report? So many reports, and I mean this is no exaggeration. When asked, so what is this report for? Well, this tells us the performance of blah, 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 blah. Great. There's a lot of people who are, no, not really. I mean, we do when we have to, or when there's a problem, and that's what's referred to and so forth. Okay. Why do you do this report? Well, I've always done this report. Who's here again? We've always done this report. Okay, so what do you mean? Well, when I started, I was told that I was supposed to get the data together for this report. Okay, so the report was in existence when you came into your position. Yes. Did you ever question why this report, if it's not as useful as you say it is, or it's not looked at or used in the way that it was intended? Did anybody ever raise a question of why we continue to do this report? Yeah, and if it ever was, people just say we've always done this report, and then everyone's used to seeing it. Wow, not a reason for a report. Not a reason to have a report. One, it's just eating people's time. Two, it's not giving any information that's being used by anybody because of its deference. And three, it's long since lost its validation. Better to have something that people would use in a format that they would use it in, okay, so that it actually creates information that is based for decisions and action items, either validation of things that were done or concerns of things that might be upcoming. The more predication that a report can provide via analytics, the better value it is, because it's like, ooh, hey guys, look, we're in this direction with this campaigns and this efforts or this strategy, and we're looking up ahead, and that's a cliff. It's not going to be good for us to keep doing this. We should stop and rethink what we need to do to correct this to get back on the road and get back on the bridge rather than fly off the cliff. That's where reports and analytics have value. Okay. Notifications can be very valuable for the people to feel, one, informed. Nobody wants to be in charge of something and they're being informed and surprised by anybody else because they didn't have the data to know that that was something that was going on that they were responsible for. That's the kiss of death for anybody. Both the person that wasn't informed and the person that should have informed them. Those two positions you never want to be in. What do you mean that happened? Who was supposed to tell me? Lauren was supposed to tell me. Lauren, get over here. Why didn't you tell me this? Ooh, not a seat I want to sit in. So because of that, you need to create communication and content that is usable and by the same token, actionable. It's not just that they have the data. So many times I get people that are asking me for data because, with all the stuff we're talking about GA4s and the GA4s that we're creating and the dashboards we're creating for, dashboards are the aggregation of the data so people can see the interpretive value of the data, just so you understand the referencing point. When I show them that it's dynamic data, that you can select dates, you can select which property if you're multi-property, you can select devices, you can select channels, you can all the cool stuff, and it's just not the angular bars of left to right navigations of numbers, but actually visualizations of pie charts and spaghettis and so forth, whatever their preference of visualization is. They're fascinated with the dynamic, like, I can check on these dates and these dates and these dates. And like we said in last week's show about GA4 versus Universal Analytics, if you're not already doing GA4, you're not going to have a let's look back when value component to it because you don't have it in place for the GA4 to have data that's historical. Your UA data is historical, and you're going to need somebody like to connect the dots between that old data and your new data. But UA data is your best historical if you've been running analytics. Now, brand people, so sorry. Brand's going to have to be the one that tells you these numbers, and they're not going to be fair about it. You have to chase it down. But for those that have control over the UA data, Universal Analytics data, looking at that historical data is very valuable. And they're very fascinated with the fact that they can pick dates. It's like a toy. That's great. So feeling particularly feisty one day, I was dealing with a client, and they were very fascinated with the idea that they can go back into dynamic date ranges and so forth like that. And so I asked him, "That's awesome that you're happy with that. What you going to do with it?" "Well, I'm going to look at dates and see what we looked like last year." "That's great. So what's that going to do for you?" And they paused and they said, "Well, so we know whether we did better or worse than what I'm looking at for dates." I said, "Okay. So what dates would you be selecting?" And they were very smart about it. They're really nice people. And they said, "We're going to look at year over year." Excellent. That is great comparison, because period over period is an artificial one that ownership loves to have. It's like, unless we're progressing always onward, always upward for budget, always upward for revenue, always upward for occupancy or ADRs or whatever it is that they're always upward on, okay, is unrealistic, because just January isn't the same as February. February isn't the same as December, but you're implying that every time it has to be better than it was the month before is not realistic. Realistic measurement is year over year. So I said, "Great. You're looking for year over year. What are you going to do with that number?" And this goes back to something I said on the live show before, that when it comes to making quizzes and surveys and all these things you use to gather data with, first is to answer the question, what would I do with the answer? It's the best way to come up with a question. What do I want to know? As in, what would I do with the data? What would I do if I could actually look at year over year performance? And this is where it turned into a learning position conversation with this client. Is there's like, well, we'd see if we're doing better or worse. When I asked them what the data, what they would do with that, and they said, "Well, we see why we did the difference, why it is different. Answer the question, why are we worse than we were the year before? Why are we better than the year before?" And I just pushed a little harder. I said, "How would you do that?" And they literally paused and they said, "Well, to be honest with you, I don't know." And that's when we started getting better at understanding the value of the data. Because then it gave the door open to say, well, what would be, and this is by asking questions, and this is you could do to yourself or your team, Selfie says, what data would I need to know, understand better to answer that question? In other words, if I have the answer of whether they're good, better, or worse than we were at the same time last year, but if I had that data, what would be my next answer that I would want? What to do about it? Okay. Well, to answer the question, what to do about it, means what happened differently. So then it got into the questions of, well, we would look at the variables of perhaps the numbers that we know that made a difference. If you're looking at revenue variations, well, was our ADR lower? Was it higher? Was our occupancy higher or lower? Was the length of stay higher or lower? Those are pretty fundamental early questions. And you would break that down into saying, yes, no, yes, no. Okay. And was that the influence that made the difference? And sometimes the numbers don't match. Your ADR was higher. Okay. But your occupancy was lower. Okay. Sometimes both have been higher, but your length of stay was lower. And then you begin to look back at the date sequence and say, oh, that was that group or the lack of the group. We have a group now. And whatever you begin to grind into the numbers a little bit more, begin to understand why if those number variances didn't answer your question or didn't give you the answer you're looking for, then what else? Well, what do we do different? Well, let's look at our channel segmentation. Where do we get the business from? Okay, we got a business from our CRM system. We got it from our paid. We got it from our paid social or organic. Whatever it is, we break it down and say, well, what are the percentages different? Well, it seems like we had more in meta search last year compared to this year. Okay, well, what ADRs were you running there compared to here? Or what was the cost of it there to here if you're looking for budget variations? That's when you begin to see the value in the data. Okay, everything we just talked about has nothing to do 99% of the time with the person deciding on the processes of what we do next when it comes to spending money towards something, because it is one facet of a multifaceted responsibility that they have. What they need to know is it's something that they need to be concerned with, because your responsibility as the team member that's related to this data is to do this drill down, to look at this data, to see the answers that you're looking for, to find the questions you should be asking, to get to the point that you go to the person that is responsible for the decision making as to what you do next and say, look, Miss Such and Such, or Mr. or they, being PC today, that we have a growing issue. Our benchmarks are off compared to year-over-year analysis. We see that we have had a channel shift in which it's now diluting our ADR. We have proper rate strategy for the channels that are contributing, but this channel is growing in contribution, but it's at a lower ADR. Maybe it's group sales. Maybe it's a channel that you're doing specials and promotions with, paid campaigns that are getting more business than they should be because you need to taper down the account. The demand is definitely there. The conversions are great. And maybe your metric of ROAS, and you're beating your chest like a marketing professional, is contributing too much diluted revenue. And your ADR is beginning to drop down. And that was one of your key metrics that you want to maintain during the time period that you're discussing this. And so you're bringing to the attention of the person saying, we need to mitigate this channel more and amplify these channels that have a higher ADR, our goal set that we've decided, and amplify their contribution to this. And then, of course, have the common sense as we get into the granularity metrics, the impact of, and this is from 2 weeks ago, conversation about revenue management, your daily discussion, daily rate setting, where I talk about politics getting involved with it, the math metric associated with raising ADR and the impact on pace and trend on bookings, that you math that out and say, hey, by raising the ADR this $10 and matching our comp set at whatever we're comparing to, that means our pace of 2 bookings a day or 3 bookings a day is going to go down to 1.8 or 2.1. At that pace will actually have costed more money for raising the rate than it was for raising the rate for what we got gathered from people booking at that higher rate. That kind of math. That's the decision that happens. Now, from the person that's in the apex and they're in the level of being brought this information, they don't want to be surprised by you telling them this. They want to be able to have some metric that says, notification-wise, I noticed from our reporting that our pace for ADR was looking that even though it's at current pace or slightly below, that at this current pace, it was going to trend below our goal for the end of this month. So you've just answered my question as to why we're beginning to see this trend. Thank you. Yes, let's make the modifications on the channel contributions and modify what you've suggested so that we can bring that trend back up to expected goals. It isn't a big old pile onion report that somebody had to rip apart down to page 88 on the spreadsheet of death to find this number. This was an active engagement between somebody that was aware there was something that was happening. They were notified at this current pace, you'll be below your goal of. There's somebody that reports to them that saw the information and had the means to go into and delve into the causations that were creating this potential and derive a solution that was actionable. So they used the reports in an analytical way. Okay. And then had that communication with the senior person that was responsible for making the decision of what to do to proceed so that they maintained and basically avoided the asteroid from hitting the planet early enough that it didn't take that much effort. Because by the time it gets really close to the end of the month in forensic reporting, where, hey, here's your report for the end of the month, looking back at the old end of the month. Oh, wow, yeah, by the way, asteroid hit the planet. Should let you know. Maybe we should have done something beforehand, but at forensic reporting, newsflash, asteroid hit the planet, which is kind of coincidental because last night, I think the asteroid reached the closest to the Earth down by the very southern tip of South America or something, 2,200 miles away. Whew. Anyways, all said and done. The idea that you can act early enough to make the modifications potentially, not all things can be modified. Sometimes you're on the highway to hell, they're there. Your market demand is tanked because of circumstances we have become painfully aware of. The world can change in a day when it comes to things like lockdowns and so forth. Granted, politically different now than it was 2 years ago. In the sense of whether they'd even be able to pull it off anymore. The idea that things can modify and that you're just on this ride, that you're now at this point, you're mitigating damage control. Okay, Captain, the plane's going down. The idea is that we get to the place where the EMTs can get to us earlier. Um, that's what you're looking at is the engines are out, the gulls have hit, you have Sully at the controls, man. Do you want to land in the Hudson or not? Um, that's what you sometimes have to face with. But the idea is that you're doing it in progress to be able to make the effective changes early enough that they have more impact on those processes than forensically looking back and just saying, yeah, that was a mess. Boy, we should have probably done something about that. Or had we done this back then, we probably could have avoided some of the pain or the cost or the bleed or whatever that we had to it. That's where reports fail, because reports usually are forensic. They're usually static. They usually are looking backwards. So all the things that they're reporting are not actionable at the moment that you finally get the report. And those reports are so massive in their time consumption, they're not even looked at, even if they were to look at them to correct the future. You know, the old idea, review the history to not repeat it. Unfortunately, with those kind of reports that are so resented for having to suck up so many people's times, they're not used for the value for what they could be, even in that circumstance. So again, topically today, reports versus notifications, what do you really need? It's about what your role is and how much information you need to be aware of. I'll tell you one flaw that I have and has always had in no matter what position and role I was in, and no matter whether I was at property level department, property level general manager, I was in regional, whether I was in sales, revenue, marketing, food and beverage, operations, whatever, whether I was at corporate, whether I was in any corporate revenue, corporate sales, corporate operations, corporate marketing, whatever. And now doing what I do. I have a to-do list. And I've always been shown to clear up the logjam of always having everything at once need to be done. You should force rank what you do. Okay. All of my force ranks are 1. I can never get off the fact that everything I put on a list, I want to get done as soon as I see that I need to do it or want to do it. That's my problem. So with these things, I'm not a notification person. And as much as I would love to be, as much as I just would like, tell me whether the asteroid's hitting sometime soon. And let me know when we get to a solution process, and then I'll get into the conversation on a granular level. I'm more of like, I want to get into the data granularly, which means that everything else that I'm responsible for requires the same focus. And there's just not enough time in the day. And that's where you spend your 24 hours a day, totally trying to be that person that is down to the ground level, nuts and bolts, rubber to the ground kind of thing. That's not your role. And very hard for people to transition from being that person to being the person that's overseeing those people, because it requires a certain relinquishing of that control, relinquishing of that engagement to people, and trusting that they're going to give you the information you need for your new role, which is a decision umbrella over them. So that's notifications is a huge value to those people at that strata. Analytical reporting is of huge value to the people that report to those people. Simplistic data is most valuable to people that don't have the time to make it their focus. And I talk about property level GMs or department people with them, where they just need to know, are there benchmarks there so they don't get in trouble with their superiors, that they should have been aware of something earlier. Now you may say, well, that's notifications, Lauren. No, because notifications are really about awareness. Benchmarks are about engagement. The benchmark has to get hit or not hit and be aware of it, so that there's an immediate engagement about how to make sure the next benchmark does not fall under that same event. That's where property level people need more of the green good, red bad, arrow up good, arrow bad down, trend is this or pace is this. That's where we talk about the daily revenue management reporting is, are we doing the things we need to do to hit the marks we need to? And I'm sorry if you're just hearing the audio, you didn't see my little puppet gesture as to the ups and downs of a roller coaster of events that go to revenue rate management strategies. But those are the things that have to be focused on to be relevant at that level. You need a much more granular engagement to the point of awareness, not to the point of explanations. Explanations come from the people that are responsible for it. Marketing department should give you the answers you need of the details that are hitting your performance report. Okay, it's just as sales or revenue management would be. Then the person above them needs to have an aggregate report that sees what they need to do to make decisions on it, to correct for earlier rather than later any changes in performance metrics from the report that is analyzed. And then the person above that needs to go over and have the notifications that are aware of the fact that these things are going a certain way, and have the value to the people below them, telling them that they also saw that They've also done these following recommendations to solve that, and they're just looking for the endorsement of the person that's responsible for the decision to enact it. There you go. Well, I don't want to beat this to death. I want to make sure that we are pretty clear with it. I do, from a newsworthy conversation, to just kind of change gears a little bit. Um, BWG, I think is what it is. They have a strategy call every few weeks, and it's been fixated by them that they have this ChatGPT conversation. It's the buzzword today. I mean, it is fascinating. It is fun. It certainly is. And I had to laugh. I had called some of my friends. I succumbed to the idea of just for fun. So I did a clickbait link. You may have seen it on LinkedIn if you follow me on LinkedIn. I did the 10 best questions to ask ChatGPT about Facebook ad copy, which is silly. I mean, we did it on the Hospitality Club. We talked about it as to what's the best questions. It's about how you ask the right question. I don't know if you're a movie that Will Smith was in called I, Robot. Hopefully you've read the books if you're a geek like me, the 7 Rules of Robots and so forth. Anyway, there was a holographic little disc that was left to Will Smith's character, and you can only answer questions. And you have to ask the right question. Well, the same goes with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is, if you don't ask the right question, you don't get the right information. And as I've complained about many times, both on these calls with BWG and other calls I've been asked to be on, I'm on advisory boards for several companies and so forth. And I share them. They're saying like, hey, I heard this ChatGPT when you do this. And it's like, Accuracy and truth are not criteria associated with the content generated by ChatGPT. It's about the data that it uses to aggregate the answers that it's asking to you. And it does it in a chat format. So you feel like there's like a HAL of 2001 Space Odyssey or a Star Trek computer on the other side going, well, I know, Lauren, that's this, this, and this. It's not. It's just correlating the answer in a means that is chat based. That's being one thing. And there's no truth and authentication to the process. So there's that concern with it. But where it's leading to in the newsworthiness of this all is that Google has as its mantra to be the best personal assistant to you. And as I tried to describe in these conversations when I was asked to participate, is think of it for people that have been parents with their children. When your child gets past a certain age, they begin to respond to you, and the world's on fire. But they're not talking to you. It's just they're responding. They're giving you feedback, and it's amazing. You interpret it whatever way you want to. It's like, oh, they're smiling at me or whatever it is, and then it goes into where they begin to talk, where they answer back, and then they begin to ask back. That's where we're going with this kind of thing. And I try to describe it in terms of, he says, okay, what if you're looking for, we go right now, we can talk to Alexa or Google or Siri or Bixby or whatever and say, hey, well, what are the closest Chinese restaurants to me? And it'll give us a series of options of data, the best being interpretively on top of that list in other orders. But it doesn't really clarify, because I may be thinking, I'm looking for Chinese food. Mentally, I'm wanting Kung Pao chicken or sweet and sour pork. And so what I'm really wanting to know is, what's the closest Chinese restaurant that has great Kung Pao chicken? Okay. That means reviews or comments or whatever have you. And what do I mean by near? Like, as in being it has to be the nearest, or just near enough that it's not inconvenient? See how that question goes back at you? So where all this is going to go in a chat format is, say, for instance, you were to ask Google Assistant, hey, Google, because I don't want to do Siri because it'll talk to me now. What's the closest Chinese restaurant? And it knows me from all the data of how I've looked at Chinese restaurants before, reviewed Chinese restaurants, or commented about Kung Pao chicken, or whatever. It's like, it might ask back, it says, are you looking for the closest or the one that has the best Kung Pao chicken? Or might be more simplistic of just, are you looking for actual physical closest or the one that has the highest rate of food? Oh, the highest rate of food. Okay. Kung Pao chicken? Yes. Okay. Any specials? No, there's 2, but one is closer and has good Kung Pao chicken. The other one is farther, isn't rated as much, but it's cheaper. Now all of a sudden I'm dialoguing. That's where I think this is going to eventually go. Here's the issue. And this has been the juxtaposition of everybody's question. Do you think it's going to be this? Do you think it's going to be this? When it can be monetized, that a single answer is valuable enough that the person that's providing the answer, the platform like Google or whoever, that you're willing to pay for it, they can monetize it, then this is going to be widespread. Because right now we look at it, we know that Microsoft has picked it up, and they spent millions, a billion maybe, I don't know, on its integration to what it'll be offering for Bing. And I think it's going to be interesting to do this. Google did this about 4 years ago. They tried to do this, but it wasn't in a level of their AI functionality is insane. I think we're all worried about Skynet and Terminator and Matrix and all this rest of the stuff, but the reality of it is we would love to have this kind of clarification engagement for personal assistants, just us, and we can go over and find out what we need to know the way we're wanting to know it. That's the progression of this. Is ChatGPT going to change the world at its current level of engagement? No, it's quasi novelty, quasi functional. I can tell you, it grinds out great code, and it's great for content development for what you're asking if you ask the right question. But beyond that, right now, it's a transitional technology. It's a means to where I think it'll go. And until the monetization of that progression gets clarified, and I think there's much more smarter people than me in the world that are already working on that problem, that's the progression we're going to see it go to. So ChatGPT as a buzzword, as a flavor of the day, because we can't talk about crypto because that crashed. We can't talk about a bunch of stuff that was buzzwords just a few weeks ago because they'd all failed. This is a new buzzword, ChatGPT and everything else. So that's my news feature of it today. So with that, I want to thank you all for the privilege of your time. If you caught us on the TV channels, Roku, Google, Amazon, Apple, thank you so much for watching us TV, Hospitality Channel. If you're watching us on our social recast or simulcast, Facebook, we're on HSMAI's Facebooks around the world. We're on Twitter. We're on YouTube, multiple channels on that as well. We're on LinkedIn, which is still restricted to one broadcast. So it's on mine if you're watching me on LinkedIn. And of course, Twitch. If you get your content from game station consoles, PS5 and Xbox, you can watch me on Twitch or computer, whatever. And also on our app. Like I said, the TV channel is also an app. You can get on your Apple iOS or Android platform. So phones, tablets, pads, all that kind of stuff. You can get the show on that whenever you want. The show is always free on the TV channel, as is also our software and services, which is our showcase platform. And it's not monetized right now. It's just whoever has content that wants to showcase what they are for hospitality industry. The hospitality channel is dedicated to hospitality as an industry. It's not a let's do food channel, or let's do travel channel. It's about the hospitality industry. It's about running restaurants, running hotels, working in the industry, finding places in the industry, learning about how to do better in the industry. That's the content that's behind the Netflix paywall that once you pay $4.99 a month, there's all this content that you can get to and pick and choose what you want to, or is adding to it and so forth. If you do want to watch any of our old TV shows, this and the ones before it, 389 before it, you can go to hospitalitychannel.tv. There, that is our perpetual I Love Lucy rerun platform. That and the podcasts are always there. You can pick it up by co-hosts that we've had, topics that we've had, or date that we ran it. So you can always be selective of what you want to look back on. All of our shows that are about a particular topic, you can listen to the progression of our dialogue. Or if you have a favorite co-host, you can follow all those shows that they've been on, or see who we've had as co-hosts, or the date that we ran it. If you want to look back in time, this week in news and technology, January of 2020 or something, we can go back then. It's pretty cool. So that's hospitalitychannel.tv. If you are a professional in hospitality marketing and want to speak with peers, this isn't for you to learn hospitality in the sense of basic levels like, oh, I want to become a hospitality marketer. What does PPC stand for? This is a journeyman up peer group. Matter of fact, you go to the website, hospitalitymarketing.club. There's just a slot for an email. Put your email in. I send you a quiz. If you get 90% on the quiz, I send you an invite link to our closed social platform. We do weekly. We do one today. Every Friday we do one. And today is our bi-weekly one as well. We have a bi-weekly one, which has a larger topic group. But we have peer discussions. We have Q&A sessions, where you get to talk to peers where it's not a competitive environment. You learn, it's like, hey, I want to learn about doing multiple carousels geo-targeted with a demo filter on it for Facebook, or I want to use this variation on video ads for TV production for YouTube, where you get a chance to actually talk to other people, where you're not dealing with a vendor that's always going to charge you for it, and or whether it's even in their wheelhouse and they just go, oh, you don't need to do that. We don't offer that, so you don't want to know about it. It bugs me crazy. And I bring this up because that's usually the case in most of our dialogues with people that are in there, is they get told because it's not being offered that it's not important. And that just drives me knocking futs, because everything is important. It's up to you, the one responsible for its production, to know whether or not there's merit to it. So that's a lot of our discussion to it. And the Hospitality Club, right now it's free. We haven't monetized that. We will eventually create a community that, once we get a core community and value proposition working with it, it's relatively new. It's only been running for a few months. But once we get to that core of that, then it'll be a pay-for function. One of the extra benefits of being in the club is you get the TV channel for free by joining. It's part of the collaboration of being on the club. So hopefully you consider it. By all means, I'd love to see your email. I'd love to send you a quiz. I'd love to invite you to the group. We have great conversations. It's a really excellent peer group to be a part of if you're in the space doing what we do. And that's why you're probably watching the show if you did. So with that, again, thank you for the privilege of your time. My name is Loren Gray, and I look forward to talking to you all next week.